From the Combine in Indianapolis, we are back on Move the Sticks with another episode looking back at the top performers from day 2 of on-field work here at Lucas Oil Stadium. Alongside Bucky Brooks, I am Rhett Lewis, and, well, the linebackers, the edge rushers, and the defensive tackles set the tone. Record-setting day in terms of fast and times, followed up by another record-setting day, Bucky. Fastest group of corners, safeties, and tight ends on average that we have ever seen at the Combine.
Yeah, really impressive group. We're talking about the defense first. The corners and safeties were terrific in terms of their movement skills. I think I saw a stat where we didn't see anyone run over a 4.6, which is crazy when we think about that position and some of the guys that we've seen. And the safety group in particular, the average time, 4.42 for safeties.
Actually faster than the corners.
You never see that. And when we think about the evolution of the game and the way people are using safeties in so many different roles, man, this speaks volumes to the athleticism that is on display in the defensive backfield.
Yeah, no question. Also the jumps. Like, my goodness, the vertical jumps. The 2026 defensive backs had an average vertical jump of 37.8. That's the third highest since 2003 and highest by a DB group since 2006. I mean, like, we had tall guys jumping high. We had shorter guys jumping high. We'll get into some of those jumps here in just a little bit. And then we'll get into the tight ends who had another incredible group led by Kenyon Sadiq. That's all coming up here. But let's start with the DBs. And I guess we just kind of start by continuing to praise the Styles family bloodline. Sonny, at 244 pounds, runs 4.46 40, jumps 43.5 inches. His brother, Lorenzo, also played with him as a safety at Ohio State, comes out and runs the only sub 4.3 40 at 4.27. Bucky, my goodness, what are they eating over there?
Yeah, no, that's great. Mama talked to Stacey Dale and was very excited about it. But former wide receiver turned defensive back to go sub 4.3 certainly helped his chances. He was a guy that came in viewed as a late round prospect. But what it does, it puts him in that conversation as someone that you're trying to find a role on the special teams units for. You just can't find guys with that kind of speed, that kind of athleticism. So Styles certainly helped himself with his performance in Indy.
Yeah, I mean, he was outstanding. Lorenzo Styles is a name to know, certainly out of this safety group. That's where he played for Ohio State. And then obviously his buddy Caleb Downs didn't do a whole lot, but he sets the market in terms of the safeties. And then when we get to the corners, Bucky, anybody in particular out of that group that kind of stood out to you? Yeah.
So before we get to the corners, I got to talk about
more safeties.
Yeah, sure. Like Dylan Denneman, just
I'm gonna let you do that.
No, just the fact that my guy comes in 6 foot, 201 pounds, 4.35 in the 40, which is crazy, 41-inch vertical, 10.5 broad jump, and he was as advertised. I know he went to your rival, if you consider those guys a rival still, Purdue. He has 6 interceptions as a freshman, led the team in tackles, then goes to Oregon. But I'm telling you, he was already climbing up the charts, but this performance solidifies himself as one of those guys that we're going to talk about on day 1 coming off the board.
No, look, he's a stud of a player. I mean, there's just, I don't care where he went to school, there's no denying it. I do think that there is something to be said for the way he was used at Purdue compared to the way he was used at Oregon. At Purdue, he's playing 25 yards off the ball.
Deep center fielder.
That's why he make those picks, had those plays on the ball. I think that's kind of, if he can find a system that really allows him to utilize that athleticism roaming the back end, he's going to be a Pro Bowl player in the NFL. All right, so he was fantastic. Bud Clark again though from the safety spot.
Yeah,
ball skills out the yin-yang.
Well, I would say that was the most impressive part, and even though his workout 4.41, 38-inch vertical, 10.7, all that was great. But the best part of it was watching him go through the drills, and at a position where a lot of guys struggle catching the ball, he catches the ball like he's been doing his entire life. And I think that is important because it matches what you see on tape, the turnovers that he comes over with, how natural it is for him to pick it off. Bud Clark helped himself. Denneman helped himself. I just like the way that these guys are able to put it together, and their athleticism turns into great production when it comes to playing the game.
Yeah, a couple of guys also now as we get into that cornerback group, tall corners, man. Decario Davis, a shade under 6'4". Ephesians Prysock, his teammate at Washington, a shade under 6'3", both running in the 4.4s. That's like, old school Seattle Seahawks drooling here, but anybody around the league is with that speed profile to go along with the size. They're not going to be considered the best in class based off the tape, but making a nice case for themselves.
I got to tell you, Rick, going all the way back to when I was scouting, we talked about this, how hard it is to find corners over 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
But now we're talking about all the guys that we're talking about running fast, jumping high, and doing this. These are all 6 foot or taller players. Those supersized guys that you're referencing, they do fit that old Legion of Boom model when you saw like a Brandon Browner dominate on the edges. And with the speed and the athleticism that they display, teams are going to take a chance on them, not only because they can play on the island, but they enhance what you want to do special teams wise. These guys being able to run fast in Indy, it only enhances their value in the minds of evaluators.
Yeah, no question. So those were, obviously some really fast times. And from the cornerback group, we're talking about Robert Spears Jennings, another bigger corner at almost 6'2" out of Oklahoma, runs 4.32. Toriano Pride Jr. from Missouri. It's a player going to have to go back and maybe study a little bit more after watching a 4.32 on tape there from Missouri.
And that's what the combine is for. The combine is to force you just to go back and check the tape. Not that it impacts you and makes you change your grade, but are there some things that you didn't see when you were doing the tape that maybe you want to give the player a little more credit for? Him, Price, running what he ran, showing up, you watch the movement drills and those things, at least from an athletic standpoint, you can see him playing at the next level. Now it's about what do we need to do to get him playing at the level that his potential would suggest that he could play at.
So another couple of guys that kind of stood out to me from the cornerback group, I thought Chris Johnson from San Diego State ran a great time, Buck, at 4.40. And, he kind of had a Senior Bowl week where we didn't notice him a whole bunch. So it was kind of good to see him out here moving around really well in the drills, too.
And watching him on tape, he reminded me a lot of Tre'Davious White from Buffalo Bills. And in seeing that in my notes, the biggest question I had, what is his speed? What does he look like from a recovery speed standpoint? Well, man, when you're that tall and you put down a 4.40 or 4.39, you certainly believe, okay, it's just about the transitions. Can we get him to turn quicker? Can we get him to understand playing the position a little bit? Because the speed is there, the athleticism is there. And when you look at the tape, he has borderline first-round potential. Now it's easier to get excited about him and what he can do because he's big, fast, and physical. Big-time game. I like what I saw from him.
Yeah, no question. Let's get into some of the jumpers from the combine. The highest vertical jump of the defensive back group, 5'8" and 5/8", D'Angelo Pons from Indiana. They made him do it like 3 times because they were like, wait a second. I mean, maybe the feet were moving a little bit at the start, but then they're like, is that real? 5'8", jumping 43.5?
Well, this is why it matters because he measures in 5'9", 182 pounds.
Yeah.
But when you pop a 43.5-inch vertical, it talks about your ability to take on those bigger guys in space because the big question is, if he gets matched up on a supersized guy, how is he going to handle it? I'm going to tell you, when you watch him on tape, he might be the most natural and instinctive defensive back that you'll see. His ability to play outside, his instincts and awareness suggest that he can play inside. When I watch him, he reminds me a lot of Kenny Moore II, who has been a big-time player for the Indianapolis Colts. He continues to check off boxes in terms of being an undersized corner who can be an outlier.
Yeah.
That vertical jump to go with his tape, man, he's going to be in the conversation. When we talk about day 2, second-round corners, I think he comes off the board before we get to the top 60.
Yeah, I agree with you on that as well. Not necessarily in your top 5 corners, but Malik Muhammad, I thought from Texas, moved around well in the drills, and he is a extremely smart corner. I was talking to him last week before he got to Indianapolis, and was just talking to him like, hey, give me a scouting report on a best receiver you faced this year. He's like, oh, it's probably Carnell Tate. He went for 5 minutes. That was week 1 of the season for them.
Yeah.
Recall about what stuck in his head about Carnell Tate, the way he ran routes, the way he was. I was like, holy smokes. Like, this dude's got it up top and can obviously do it out on the field.
Yeah, the physical skills are one thing, but we talk about the combine also, the interview process where you talk to guys and get a chance to really assess their football IQ what they know about playing the game, playing their own position, more importantly, who they're playing against. Because to survive in the league for a long time, it is about your knowledge base to go with your athleticism. Really impressed with what he displayed. Yeah. And then you can tell by the way that he talked to you, the way that he interacted. I am confident that he interviewed well. He enhanced his value.
Yeah, I would agree with you. He ends up running 4.42 official, 1.52 on the 10, which is obviously flying. The 1.51 on the 10 went to Toriano Pride. I think we had one player on the 10 from the DB group go sub 1.5. Sub 1.5 on a 10 is, that's Lorenzo Styles.
I mean,
went 1.49. Which is
crazy speed.
And that's the fastest one out there, which makes sense since he had the fastest 40-yard dash time in particular. Doesn't always correlate that way, but certainly with a jump start on it. So I thought that Dalen Everett was another one that I thought just kind of overall testing, jumps, drills, just kind of nailed it there. We're also not getting guys running a lot of the shuttles anymore. The 20, the 3-cone. I mean, I'm talking like a handful, like 5-6 guys ended up doing those shuttles.
Well, I think what's difficult in the combine training, you place such an emphasis on the 40 time in your ball drills. I would say, Red, it's really impossible to be great at everything on this day because it does come to a point where the stamina impacts the way that you perform, because you do those shuttles at the end of the 40 and all the ball drills or whatever. You think about gas, you burn up a lot of gas doing all those things. So guys are taking their time and maybe electing to do them back at their pro day where they're just training for that. They're not going to run the 40. Look, I'm going to do these shuttles and I'm going to do whatever positional drills that you want. If I test at all.
Correct. Now, we've certainly seen some guys decline. Like guys who played deep into the season, I think you can understand it. They're weeks behind other guys who've been training since December 14th. They played a whole another month and a half of college football. So you certainly understand, guys that were played deep into the CFP kind of choosing to maybe do some of their testing, because so much of that is technique and fundamentals.
It is a fundamental thing. And that's what guys are learning, because you have to practice those drills a ton to understand how to shave off hundreds of seconds off those marks.
Well, I mean, like think about Toriano Pride. He runs 4.36. You think, good enough, man. Why even run a second one? Well, he's like, well, he refined the technique a little bit. He drops 400ths and ends up running 4.32, which is actually kind of a big difference in that's on his second run.
Yeah, big difference on card. And the thing about it, what you would eventually like to do to see the shuttles is one thing to run fast in a straight line, but do you have the change of direction, quickness, and agility to put a fast time down when we do those shuttles?
Okay, let's get any other corners you want to hit, or let's get to the tight ends. We knew Kenyon Sadiq was going to put on a show, and boy, did he put on a show. The tight end from Oregon comes out and rips a 4.40 on the first attempt. You're like, okay, that's good. Let's see what the second attempt is. Oh, the second attempt is 4.40 on the dot, and then we get word that Kenyon Sadiq, upon the official calculation of the time, goes sub 4.4 at 4.39.
I mean, look, it's one of the things that you love about this event, because the athleticism. We talk about 4.39, 43.5-inch vertical, 11 broad. He was a guy that everyone had already targeted because Bruce Feldman had done a great job identifying him as one of the freaks. And now you take that freakish athleticism, you combine it with the things that you've seen on tape, and I think we probably could say he was underutilized on the at Oregon. But it's one of the things that you like: electric athlete, explosive, smooth playmaker. Look, he has, to me, all-pro potential as an H-back. I just want to see him continue to expand his game. But Red, I think he locked himself in to
first rounder. I mean, he's the first tight end we've ever seen run a sub 4.40 here at the Combine since we've been tracking back in 2003. But that tight end group as a whole, thought really performed well. It was the fastest tight end group we've ever seen. The 4.63 average 40-yard dash time was the fastest. The average vertical was 36.3, which was the highest average vert from the tight end group, and then the broad was the longest. So record setting across the board, and a lot of that is thanks to Eli Stowers of Vanderbilt. who went up and touched the sky at 45.5 inches on the vert. What are we doing?
Yeah, look, it's going to be interesting to see how this impacts how people view Eli Stowers. I can admit I was the low guy on him. He was number 5 on my top 5 list at tight ends. But now, you talk about 4.5, 45.5 inch vertical is ridiculous. 11.3 broad jump, much better than anticipated for me, but polished route runner, explosive jumper. Now we're beginning to talk about creating mismatches in space. Jumbo, slot, hybrid receiver, you begin to move around. How do you utilize him? Moreover, how will defenses treat him? Do they treat him like a wide receiver, put a nickel on him? Or do they treat him like a tight end and put a linebacker on him where he's going to have huge athletic advantages? He helped himself because I already know the creative offensive coordinators that watched that and looked at the numbers, they're going to tell their guys, oh, I can figure it out, coach. I'll figure out a way to kind of maximize his talent. This is what the combine does. It helps guys when you get a chance to see that display of athleticism.
Yeah, no question. Man, that was fun to watch. I thought he was terrific. My guy from Indiana, Riley Nowakowski, I thought at 4.66, plenty fast enough for the way that he plays. Gritty, kind of stick your face in the fan type of player as a blocker. Probably one of the more ferocious blockers of this group. Always fun to watch those guys run through the gauntlet too, which was our first taste of the gauntlet. I think a great test of kind of natural hands. You know, like we mentioned with a guy like Bud Clark. Just that comes natural.
So natural.
You know what I mean? And then obviously some of the tight ends look better than others in those. Max Clare, I thought, did well in the tight end portion of the gauntlet drills. Any other tight ends that kind of stood out to you amongst that group?
No, I mean, the guys are so overwhelming at the top. You talk about Sadiq and Stowers. It's hard when those guys pop those numbers, but you're right. I was really impressed with the overall depth and talent in the tight end class. We talked about it when I talked to guys in the league. They talked about the depth of this class is really impressive. We're going to see a bunch of those guys come off the board day 2, early day 3, because we can see how people are using that position to really exploit mismatches all over the board.
Yeah, your number 2 tight end, right? Dallin Bentley from Utah.
Big guy.
4.6'2" in the 40. Again, I think for a tight end, that is plenty fast enough. I'm looking through some of the verts. I mean, it's just Eli Stowers at 45. Sadiq goes 43. Stowers 11'3" in the broad, which is a record for tight ends. 11'1" for Kenyon Sadiq. I mean, those guys were terrific. And then I thought Roush with the hands in some of the drills was solid. RJ Maryland at SMU put 2 tight ends in the 4.5 range. Matthew Hibner at 4.57, who made a big catch in the Senior Bowl, and is a guy who has some serious special teams value, was an intriguing one to me. And then RJ Maryland from SMU runs 4.51. Stowers, for his part, 4.51 as well. Those were the fastest. But Kenyon Sadiq, we didn't get any of the tight ends in the 4.4s, and he just goes 4.3. So, I mean, absolutely won the day, in my opinion. There.
Crazy.
So
he did one day. He helped himself.
Yeah.
He and Stowers really, really helped themselves.
All right, so that's a look at some of the guys who we saw really stand out. Now, of course, getting ready to go today, running backs, quarterbacks, and wide receivers. And just final thought here, again, this to me feels like a day for quarterbacks to kind of rebound their image. And the last times maybe we saw them from 25 that didn't quite leave the best taste in our mouths, that had high expectations going in. Klubnik, Nussmeier, Aller, that kind of group, chance to really kind of rebrand who they are. Yeah,
this is what this is about. It is a bit of a redemption tour when you talk about it. And so the calendar flips. You have the Senior Bowl, the All-Star Games to reignite some of the conversation. This combine, being able to interview and fully disclose what may have impacted your final season, that is important. But then if you can throw it all over the yard, you can show the whip, you can kind of catch their eyes. Yes, it changes the narrative and the conversation in those pre-draft meetings.
All right, so that is a look at what we have going on today. Of course, we will be back here with you tomorrow for a wrap-up of, what we consider one of the main events of the Combine, the wide receivers, the running backs, and the quarterbacks. So stay tuned. Look forward to being right back here with you tomorrow right here on Move This Things.